God's natural revelation is something that cannot be denied, and by virtue of deny, I mean instantiated, okay? In other words, the denial of Christianity, okay, is impossible, because the Christian God and his attribute set would have to exist, and we would know this by his self-disclosure, in order for there to be metaphysical grounds to reason and defend, prove, or demonstrate anything.
Or deny anything.
Yeah. Okay, so when we appeal to God and the God of the Bible, we can only appeal to one thing, okay, line of reasoning, and that is God's self-disclosure of himself via natural revelation and special revelation. If there is an appeal to God's existence that is not firmly grounded in that, okay, if any line of reasoning for God leaves that out, then that reasoning is fallacious and is an attempt to justify the Christian God by borrowing from what is called ancient Greek philosophy. So the only biblical way of defending the existence of God and the Christian God is an appeal to his revelation and the ramifications of God's revelation of himself, which includes the indisputability and the indeniability of that self-disclosure. That if somebody does not accept the existence of the Christian God and the Christian worldview via his revelation, then they can only do so from another worldview, but that worldview will be indefensible. And the reason why is because that worldview does not exist. At least not ontologically. Okay? So in order for there to be, for example, truth or facts or reason, right? The world has to be in a certain way. Otherwise, there can't be human intelligibility. There couldn't be predication. We couldn't have access or attainability of that some things are true or false. And that foundation is there's going to have to be a God. There's going to have to be a creator. But that creator is going to have a specific attribute set. And without that attribute set, there couldn't be human intelligibility. So, for example, unless this world is created by God and sustained by God and runs according to his parameters and his redemptive plan of human history, then there would be no grounds upon which to appeal to reason or predication, because that's going to rely on the uniformity of nature, okay? That certain things are regular while some things are not. So we could only justify that the uniformity of nature is actual via God's indirect and direct revelation. If that is rejected, then the uniformity of nature will just simply be an arbitrary parameter that somebody adopts in violation of their own criterion of belief. Okay? So when I say Christianity is objectively provable, it doesn't mean that the recipients of God's revelation are necessarily going to accept it or be persuaded, because we're not dealing with people who are unbiased. We're dealing with people who are inherently biased and are committed to the autonomy of human reason, as opposed to human reason that recognizes that reason itself is revelatory of God and must be in submission to God's mind and how he has revealed his mind, either through natural or special revelation.
I should note quickly that we actually have many people admit they don't want God to exist.
Okay. So, for example, like I'm like an agnostic, so I would say I don't know that God exists, but you're saying that I can't, like that position wouldn't be able to exist.
Do you positively believe it's necessary to reference God as the precondition of all facts?
To reference God as
do you positively believe that it is necessary to reference God as the necessary precondition of all facts? that God is ultimate and creator?
No.
Okay. Well, then that entails that God cannot exist. Right? Because then you believe that there are one or more facts that can be invoked as actual and be intelligible without metaphysically referencing God as the precondition. But God cannot logically coexist in a world where even one fact does not necessitate referencing him. So in spite of the fact that you're claiming to be an agnostic, which is an attempt to present yourself as being neutral, in fact, you're not neutral. You've decided that facts do not necessitate referencing God, right?
Yeah. When you say God, you mean the creator of the universe?
I'm talking about what is ultimate, absolute, and the creator and institutor of all possibility and impossibility. So although you are trying to conceptualize yourself in a position of neutrality, upon examination, you believe that there are one or more facts that do not necessitate referencing God. Now, what follows necessarily from that is God cannot logically coexist in such a world. So your belief that it's not necessary to reference God constitutes the falsity of God. You understand?
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying.
Now, you can be agnostic about gold on Mars, but you can't be agnostic about God. Now, people claim to be agnostic, they verbalize it, but it cannot be defended from a transcendental perspective. If we don't look at the situation from a transcendental perspective and we treat God as we would any other state of affairs, well, in that analysis, you could be neutral, but that would be an incomplete analysis. It would be a fallacious analysis. Now, this approach is very widespread throughout the world. It even fools professional philosophers. Okay. So either one believes that it's necessary to reference God as the necessary precondition of all facts that are not God, right? Right? Either you believe that or you don't have that belief. If you don't have that belief, it consequently means that you believe that one or more facts can be invoked and possess intelligibility without the necessity of referencing God. That means that God cannot coexist in that world. Logically, that is. So, in fact, you're not neutral. In fact, what you stipulate that you do believe entails that God cannot exist.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Now, here's the deal, okay? The Bible teaches us that God has made everyone to know that he exists, but that because human beings do not want to acknowledge God, nor do they want to be thankful, they suppress that truth, and they turn and they worship the creation, okay? So last week I spoke with a world-renowned atheist physicist who says there's no need for God. We can explain the world through the laws of nature. Well, that's exactly what Romans says. They chose not to acknowledge God and they worshiped creation. In other words, the laws of nature is our ontological starting point, right? That's our creator, not God, the laws of nature. But that cannot be defended. And in fact, it's not coherent.
But you said earlier, like, all facts would be dependent on like that belief in God, right?
Well, unless we're talking about some finite creature, when we talk about God in these conversations, God is going to be defined conceptually as that which is ultimate, absolute, the creator, the source of all possibility and impossibility. Okay? Now, accepting that definitionally does not mean that somebody is granting that God under that definition is actual. But unless we agree upon a minimalist definition, then we can't converse, because then we would just be talking past each other. That's why
we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, that's why when I talk with atheists about, okay, well, how is it that God doesn't exist? And then what they'll do is they'll bait and switch, and they'll say, well, which God? Say, well, why would it matter? Okay, suppose somebody says to me they hate ice cream. Okay, period. They hate ice cream. And I would say, well, why is it that you hate ice cream? And they say, well, which flavor? What difference does it make what flavor it is? You hate ice cream. Atheists are notorious for extremely bad reasoning. Extremely bad reasoning. See, God would have to exist and be creator of this world even for somebody to attempt to deny him. Because without God instituting this world and securing it, operating, and its continuity, then there would be no identifiable, attestable foundation metaphysically to secure reason. Right? How are they going to establish that the uniformity of nature is true? What are they going to do? Appeal to past succession without deviation or future predictive capability? That doesn't justify the uniformity of nature. So,
Well,
the fact, listen,
would you say that's like,
what I'm saying to you is this, okay? Unless we acknowledge that this world and everything that's in is revelatory of God, that he's made it to be revelatory of God, then if somebody rejects the world as being revelatory of God, then when they reject that God is because everything reveals God, then they're going to have to believe in some foundational principles or parameters by which they can talk and reason and make truth statements. Well, one of those things that's going to have to be true is causality and the uniformity of nature, which they think is a no-brainer. But the answer is, how do they justify that the uniformity of nature is actually true? Simply appealing to the continuity of certain or consistency of certain events without deviation under your observation does not rationally justify the uniformity of nature. Nor would predictive success. And in fact, Dr. Lawrence Krauss tried to pull the predictive success card, and I said that doesn't matter. And even one YouTube critic was mocking me when I said it doesn't matter. I didn't say it doesn't matter in a practical sense in the world of science. What I'm saying from a theological and philosophical perspective, appealing to predictive success is just simply appealing to a chain of consistency. Okay?
Well, you would have to, even that's just granting that the predictions are successful. In order to evaluate that they're successful, you'd have to use sense data, which would require that there's uniformity of nature in the first place. So you're actually begging the question.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Yeah. It's overlapping and compounding. So there's no rational justification for the advocacy or the expectation that the future will be like the past.
In a not God world.
In a not God. Yeah, thank you for adding that qualification. I certainly believe in the uniformity of nature, and atheists are justified in believing in the uniformity of nature because they're in God's world, and they believe in the uniformity of nature because God has made them to think that way at a foundational level, and they couldn't think otherwise. But when they reject, the God worldview on the grounds of reason, then the question is, based upon what rationale or justification can they instantiate the uniformity of nature, or that there are in fact laws of nature. What imposes
or
it?
any other fact, any fact, actually.
Yes, yeah. So I asked Dr. Lawrence Krauss. By the way, you might find this interesting. Go onto YouTube, type in Darth Dawkins versus Lawrence Krauss. Okay. You know, he just kept on appealing to things, you know, that he thought was an absolute given, but he can't justify from his atheist perspective. You know, I asked him, is anything impossible? And there was dead silence. I mean, this is a world-renowned atheist firebrand.
And then he dodges the question.
Yeah.
Says,
And
well, if the multiverse is true, then no.
I said, is anything impossible? I asked that same question to two other PhDs in philosophy, both of whom were atheists, and neither one of them could stipulate or defend why anything is impossible. But if they don't defend that anything is impossible, then they can't assert what can be. Because if you assert that something can be, all I have to do is contradict you, and you can't say, well, that's impossible. Well, what makes it impossible? If it's not God, then what makes it impossible? Then they're going to have to appeal to a realm of darkness and metaphysical mystery for which they don't have rational justification for.
So if I get this, if I understand it, you're basically saying they can't, basically their fundamentals are just, there's nothing really substantive. It's just as I said, it's just an axiom. So
it's worse. It's worse than that. Okay. It's worse than that. Every proposition we speak is worldview specific. It can't be instantiated, nor can its intelligibility be defended unless it's worldview specific, right? In other words, we need background information. We need a metaphysical context out of which these facts or propositions actually exist and possess intelligibility. So only in a world where God is, where he has created this world, and he has revealed himself through creation, through natural revelation and special revelation, can we come to know that what are putative facts are in fact facts, right? Because a fact would only be a fact starting in the mind of God, and then God implementing that in his creation, and then being sovereign over that creation, he sustains the parameters of the world so the fact can be a fact. But unbelievers laugh at that. Well, they're laughing too soon, because you see, they have no background information for the factness of facts. They have no metaphysical background information. There is no ultimate or absolute by which they can appeal to ground intelligibility for facts, or to ground what we call predication. They think they do because they're either sloppy, don't care, or simply unwilling to look at their position from a metaphysical perspective, recognizing that without God, they will have no identifiable metaphysic that they can place facts on. So this is a nuclear strength line of reasoning, and it cannot be defeated. This is why this type of biblical presuppositional reasoning causes such immense hemorrhoidal pain upon the atheist community on the internet and on YouTube. They utterly despise with a passion biblical presuppositionalism. It causes them great angst and consternation.
This is why you get columns like that dude we were dealing with, or listening to rather, for the past few hours.
Yeah. We don't
and then what they engage in is they don't rebut, just like that guy. They don't rebut biblical presuppositionalism. They vilify the person who presents it.
Yeah, if you watch the video that was posted, you will find little to none substantive representation of what I share, believe, or teach, as well as other Christians on this platform. And all we just saw is diarrhea of the mouth, running commentary, and just vilification. Without the God of Christianity, you can prove nothing.